My message here today is that now is the time for cloud disaster recovery, because it's going to save you all the time, the money, and a lot of worry when you think about your disaster recovery plan. So as we go through this, again, please, ask your questions, make sure it's interactive. And I want to start out just with who is eVault, because this is an important thing. You see eVault and Seagate together all the time, because we are a wholly owned subsidiary of Seagate. And we've been in the business, in this online cloud-connected backup business since 1997, long before cloud was even a term. So before cloud was cool, we were there, we were doing it. We're one of the first ones. In fact, we are the leader in online backup and recovery. We have over 38,000 customers. We have about 100 petabytes of data that we manage on a regular basis. And we do about 15,000 recoveries for our customers every month.
Where are your data centers?
We have 12 data centers spread across actually North America and Europe. And we also have a whole set of service providers that stand up data centers with our technology as well. So pretty much anywhere that you can want it in North America, you'll be able to find it, yeah. All right, am I recording? Yes. Okay, on the next slide, I just want to reinforce the point. When we start talking about disaster recovery, sometimes people fall asleep. Like I said, ask your questions, make sure that we overcome your objections as we talk about the cloud. All right, so just to tell you a little bit about me, I'm from San Francisco. I'm located out there. So I'm just getting started in my morning. I'm a little bit tired, actually, a little bit jet lagged. But more importantly, I have two children. I have a 1-year-old and a 6-year-old. And my 6-year-old is a boy. Wanted to play kindergarten basketball last year. And I kept on getting these emails. I'd signed him up for it. It was great, but they needed coaches. Can someone please help out with the coaching? Now, okay, so first off, moms usually don't do this. And I was just thinking that I'm the greatest basketball player because I played when I was in 7th grade. So it's like I have a lot of experience on that. But on the other hand, it's like I was, kind of a warm pulse. I could be out there and keep them from running out of the building or...
YouTube is fine for teaching us.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I could keep them from getting lost. But what I noticed about this whole thing, have you guys seen kindergarten soccer players? Yeah, so they tend to huddle. Well, basketball players are the same exact way, especially when they're 5 years old. So the first thing I had to teach my son to do, and the team to do, is not stand in front of your teammate and ask for the ball, because that doesn't get you anywhere down the court, right? So that was kind of level one. It took a couple weeks, but they finally got that. That was good. Second level that we had to teach them was when you get the ball, actually dribble it towards the other basket and shoot. All right, so that was, kind of level 2, and they got that too. That was great. Third level, which we never quite got to, but I think it was maybe the coach's problem, was actually to pass it off to your other teammates. Because, maybe the teammates might be able to shoot better than you, or maybe they're not swarmed by the other team. And what kind of when I think about disaster recovery, especially disaster recovery in the cloud, I see those 3 levels as well. So first level, standing right in front of you, tends to be, hey, here, system admin, take this tape, put it in your closet at home, and hopefully we'll be able to recover. Right? That's like level 1, it's the same thing. Level 2 is, kind of bring it down, shoot it. I see as being, you've bought an entire co-location space, you've bought additional storage, additional software, you have manpower to man it. That's level 2. It's like, okay, you're going to do it all yourself. Level 3, pass it off to your teammate when you start working with a service provider to actually do DR for you. And so when we look at cloud disaster recovery, that's the level 3 of disaster recovery, the basketball team. All right, so with that, I wanted to talk about one team that did that very well, or one company that did that well. It was a small bank that was in New Orleans that got hit and taken out of business with Katrina, just like everybody else. But they had been sending their data off-site into a data center that was in Atlanta. And because they were working with their service provider, they were actually one of the first businesses back up and running. They just, they were able to get to an internet connection. They called their service provider. The service provider restored all their data for them, got their applications up and running, and they were good to go. One of the first ones running after Katrina. Okay, so the cloud can be used to be actually a competitive advantage for many people. But before you actually embrace the cloud, as Sammy was talking about, there's some questions that need to be answered. The first one is, well, how quickly am I going to actually be able to recover it? Because the cloud is off-site, out of region, it's a lot of data, what do I do? The other one is, how much am I going to have to pay for this? Sounds really expensive. It's gotten better. It's not. And then the third question is all my data now exposed? Is somebody else going to have access to my private company information? And so I'm going to talk through each one of these three questions, but I want to stop here. Do you guys have any other questions that you want to add to that? Concerns? Okay, just ask them along the way. All right, so how fast will you be able to recover? So I didn't see, actually, I think I saw somebody talking about using backup exec with tape, I don't know, to do their disaster recovery strategy. Is that? No, okay. So as soon as you move off a tape, disk to disk is much, much faster. And the reason being that with a disk to disk solution, what you tend to do is you take an initial backup, an initial snapshot of all of your data, and then after that, everything's just incrementals. So as your data changes, you only capture the changed block of information. It makes it much, much faster.
Where does the dedupe actually happen?
It happens on the client side.
That is, okay.
Yeah. So as long as it's happening on the client side, then it makes it much, much faster.
So if you're backing up, if you want to back up, I don't know what the scales to, if you want to do a data center, you have an agent or something that runs on individual machines? Or
Yes, absolutely. Yep. Yeah, so it's important that that agent be on the individual machine, but it really is important that when you look at the technology, you're looking at technology that's doing this, kind of client-side block-level deduplication. And the value of that is that you never have to take another full snapshot again. And so if you imagine what that means for moving it off-site, everything is just compressed and that much smaller and that much faster. And then if you put the appropriate security, kind of the security process in place, then it's also very secure. All right, so the next thing that we look at is this whole notion of cloud connected. And what we've seen over the years, when you start talking about backup and recoveries, there's definitely been an evolution. There's always an evolution slide, because there's always been an evolution, hopefully. And, if you look at this, you started off on the far left-hand side with really cheap tape backup. Maybe not so fast, maybe not so reliable. Then you moved into the whole replication between two sites with a co-location, and that was great. Absolutely great, because it was much faster, it was much more reliable, but it was really, really expensive because you had to duplicate all your equipment and such. Cloud made everything much, much cheaper, but if you had small bandwidth, small pipes, then you had a problem with moving your data off-site in time. And so that's why the cloud connected, which gives you the best of the on-site and the off-site, what people call hybrid or disk to cloud, is the best solution that we always see, because what it does is it keeps a copy of your data on-site, and that makes it much faster to back up, much faster to recover if it's just little kind of components or applications that you need to recover. And then the off-site makes sure that no matter what happens, you're always going to be protected. All right, so any questions so far? Yes?
Do you back up the client's data?
Yes.
Stored on your machines, do you back up those machines with your company?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So the question is, what kind of redundancy actually exists in the cloud? And there's a couple different types of redundancy. You either can have a copy on site and a copy in the cloud, or you can have a copy in the cloud, and that actually could be replicated to another cloud. So you'll always have two copies of your data, either locally and remotely, or remotely and remotely. And then there's some snapshotting that happens as well. So, what other questions? All right. Okay, so let's look at one business that basically the survival of their business depended upon this cloud-connected backup, because they were Citus Companies was a commercial real estate company that did a whole bunch of loan processing, and their rating depended upon their ability to get their data back in time. So they had, kind of auditors come in, and they would downgrade them if they didn't have the disaster recovery plan that was readily executable and verifiable, what have you. And they were actually using tape to do all their backups. And the way they saw it was like, I'm not sure that I'm actually going to ever be able to recover this, especially if my auditors come in. And they saw with Hurricane Ike, it was kind of a close miss for them. Luckily, they were not taken offline, but they said if I was taken offline, I'm not sure what would have happened. So what they did was they implemented this cloud-connected backup where they had about 30 servers they were protecting, the 5 terabytes of data that was being protected, and they kept a copy on site and a copy in the cloud. And the important part to understand was that their backup window went from about 2.5 days on the weekend to only 6 to 8 hours, so 10 times faster than a tape backup that they were using in the past. All right, so the next thing that we wanted to talk about is, okay, so that's backup, got much faster, but also recovery's become much more stringent. I was talking with Mike earlier about this, is that, there's mission critical systems, and those systems have to come up within, minutes, not hours, not days. And Gartner ran a study last year that they found that there's a tremendous surge towards more faster recovery times, more stringent SLAs by the business. And so what we've seen companies do in order to meet this recovery is that they've actually looked at the needs and the components that they're trying to recover and said, okay, what are the SLAs that I need to meet? So if it's just an application and file systems that they need to recover, and they need to recover that within minutes, then they're able to adopt a cloud-connected solution, and that solves the requirements. But if they have to bring an entire system back online from bare metal, they look at an integrated bare metal recovery solution or package. And then there's this whole notion of, all right, I might have a little bit more time, I have a site that I need to protect, and this is where they're talking about cloud disaster recovery, and they're adopting the cloud disaster recovery solution. So it's really a tiering of their strategy that they're putting in place. And so when we talk about disaster recovery in the cloud, really what it is you're moving your data off into the cloud, and when the site goes down, you're able to stand up all your applications in the cloud as if they're kind of running in your data center, in your local data center. So you usually stood up on top of a virtual machine, and there's a whole layer of networking, virtual private networking, that is provisioned so that your employees, your applications, can connect to each other as if they were still there. So that's what we mean when we talk about disaster recovery in the cloud. And virtualization has been a boon for this. You guys probably know how much virtualization has helped our our industry, and the fact that it's totally revolutionized what we can achieve. Because before, you probably worked with I think somebody talked about working with SunGuard, where you actually had to rent equipment in their data center, you had to move the tapes over to them, and go in and do your disaster recovery testing and actually execute your disaster recovery scenario if you ever needed it. But with virtualization, we can stand up machines in a data center as if they're there. Kind of either warm standby or hot standby machines in applications that are ready at your call. So it's really changed everything, as well as the disk-to-disk backup has made things much more reliable, faster, and secure.
With virtualization, do you have so if everything's completely virtualized, so we're all VMware, would each VM still need that individual agent, or do you have something that would hook into vCenter that would do images?
It would hook into vCenter.
It would. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So it just uses the vSphere API, I believe, or vStorage API. Mike would know all that. Okay, so let's talk about one customer that needed this, and this was out in California. It was a law firm. I don't think any of you guys are lawyers or deal with lawyers. Okay, good. Okay. So as you know, the more time that you take offline, every hour that you're down, or every 15 minutes that you're down, total loss of revenue, right? Your law team is not billing, you're losing money instantly. And so if you can't email, if you can't communicate with the rest of your team, it's a significant risk to the business. And so Aldrich, Bonifant, and Moore, who had adopted this cloud disaster recovery service, they found that they were out in the Los Angeles area. And unfortunately, Los Angeles is known, and California is known for not having the most reliable power grid. And so their office was taken offline just by a power surge in the building. And they were scrambling, but they were able to call us, and we were able to get them back up in line within about 5 hours. And so all of their lawyers continued the bills, continued billing, continued their work using the eVault Cloud Disaster Recovery Service. All right. I'm going to stop here. Any questions? No. All right. Okay, so the next one is, how is your budget going to be impacted? What we've seen with virtualization, with the cloud infrastructure, the whole cost of warm sites and hot sites have come down significantly. So you can achieve much faster RTOs than you've ever been able to do in the past, just because the infrastructure that's been put in place. But if you look at what one company saw in terms of their savings, what they did was they took all of this money that they spent on their servers and their storage and their software and all the services that they had from hosting and bandwidth and what have you, and changed that into a single flat monthly fee. And they were able to save about $90,000 per year. And not only were they able to save on just the capital expenditures and operating budget, but they also saved on headcount that they redeployed to do, more important projects. Because they found that they only required about 20% of the time that they used to take doing the DR planning themselves, doing the DR testing themselves, monitoring those, the backup infrastructure themselves. So it was a huge savings for them. But you can actually get yourself into trouble when you look at disaster recovery in the cloud. And the reason being, one thing is that data is growing, at least from what we've seen, is that data has grown in our infrastructure about 30% year over year. And that's just of what our customers are protecting. So 30% year over year. So if you imagine that they contracted for a terabyte worth of protection, 3 years out, they're well past that, kind of their limits. And if they're going to be charged overages, that's where you can get yourself in trouble. Now, the other thing that we've noticed is that I've actually been working for eVault for about 5 years. And when I started working here, we charged about $50 a gig 5 years ago to store data in the cloud. And what you can imagine, it was priced per meg because not that much data was going up into the cloud. Well, our average customer now is about a terabyte or so in size at least. And so as soon as you start talking about that much bigger magnitude of pricing, of storage, the pricing has come down, and I think the average pricing per terabyte now per gigabyte is about $1. So it went from $50 5 years ago to about $1. Now, when you look at the contracts that you are getting yourself into, do not get yourself into a long-term contract. Make sure that it's kind of annually renewed, and you look at your pricing on a regular basis, because the economics have changed substantially over the past couple of years. And then the other thing to watch out for are these recovery charges. So sometimes companies actually charge to do a recovery, charge for every day that you run your infrastructure in their cloud. And so, it's important to understand exactly what that's going to be, so that you're not getting yourself into either a contract that's going to, kind of overextend your budget, or you're not using it in such a way that might get you into trouble. We were talking with a company, and we were actually nice about this one, because after a certain point in time, you probably do have to get back into your own data center. So we were talking to a company, and they were doing an e-discovery project. And in order to do the e-discovery project, what they kept on doing was recovering their email server for the past 30 to 60 recovery points, and kept on going back, doing the search to see what it looked like, then went back again to see do the search and grab all the files that they needed. And so we were really nice about that, but that's not a typical use case for this kind of service. and like I said, you can get yourself into trouble if the provider is charging for every recovery.
outside of just DR, like to just have just straight storage that you can tie to we have a VTUG that we can present. It's just storage that
Like primary storage?
right, like it doesn't. Your end users don't see it as cloud storage. It's just kind of aggregated into the environment.
Right, right. At this point in time, we don't. Right now, we're focused really on that secondary storage market, so the data protection, the cloud disaster recovery, and your endpoint protection. If you have a lot of laptops wandering around, the ability to kind of lock those down and keep them safe. So. I'm sorry? They have a good solution for that, yeah. Okay, so then the other question is, if you ever have come across an auditor, they're asking the question of, how safe is your data, and what's the data privacy that has been granted to your information. And so the way we look at it is that it's absolutely critical that your data is encrypted before it moves off the system that's protecting it, or that's being protected. So it has to be encrypted before it even goes across your LAN. And that's one of the things that, we strongly believe from an end-to-end security perspective. It needs to be encrypted, it needs to go over an encrypted wire, it needs to stay encrypted at rest. And then the other thing is the encryption key should be your own as a customer. Because what happens is when you look at, some of the concerns that a lot of our customers have around, like the Patriot Act. Well, when the U.S. government if they ever did, they haven't done this yet, thank God. If they were ever to come to us and say, I need this company's data, we would say, well, we can't do that because, first off, it's just encrypted blocks of data. We have no idea what that is. And then we say, go work with them, and if they give us the approval, first off, they have to give you the encryption key, and then we'll give you the information if they give us approval to do so. So it's very important to understand that there's a lot of concerns around data privacy, but there's been a lot of mechanisms put in place specifically to address that concern, including things like the Safe Harbor Act and a lot of federal and state data protection laws.
Here in Massachusetts, it's called WISP.
RESPA?
Here in Massachusetts, it's called WISP.
WISP. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so then the other thing that's important to understand is the standards that cloud service providers are being subject to have changed. We actually used to go through something called a SAS 70 audit. And really what that was about was your financial viability as a service provider. That said nothing about the practices that you were adopting and the policies that you were adopting as a cloud service provider. And so there's this whole new standard, and I'm going to try and say it without garbling it, SSAE 16. So I think it's like Statement of Standards, Attestation, whatever. But anyway, it's about, exactly what the systems are that you are putting in place regarding the safety of people and the security of people's data, as well as how you're running your business to make sure that you are not a fly-by-night operation. And so you should be able to get the SSAE 16 report from any cloud service provider that you would engage with. Okay, anytime I start talking about security, it gets really boring. So it's interesting to note that there are some businesses who have adopted the cloud as, kind of mechanisms to make sure that their business continues to grow and actually is secure and safe. So everybody's saying, oh, you put it off in the cloud, doesn't that put your business at risk? Well, for this company, Clinical Financial Services, it actually guaranteed their business for them because they were a financial services provider to the pharmaceutical industry, and those pharma providers needed to be able to audit their business partners. And by virtue of using the eVault Cloud Disaster Recovery Service, they were able to get, kind of the assurance of their data security. They were also able to get written cloud disaster recovery plans, disaster recovery plans, and proof of the DR testing results. So this helped them continue to grow their business and offloaded a lot of the work to somebody else so that they didn't have to bog down their business, their IT team, with something that was, maybe not strategic as much. All right, so I had started out talking about the fact that cloud disaster recovery is real, and people are adopting it, and it's time to get started. So as we get started, there's a couple of factors that you should consider when you're choosing your cloud service provider. The first one is security, that I've talked about quite a bit. Not only do we believe strongly in the end-to-end encryption, but also the physical security of the data centers that are holding your data. So not only should you know where your data is, that's important. Sometimes not every cloud can tell you where your data is, but also the fact that the cages are locked down, you're using, kind of key card access to get into that data center, that you have biometric access where possible, just around the physical security of the facilities. Then the other thing is kind of in relation to this whole discussion about, well, do I use Amazon for the solution? And it's this whole notion of like a generic cloud versus a purpose-built cloud. By using a purpose-built cloud, what you end up getting is a cloud that understands the application that's running. You have a team that's there that can help you kind of build it out and respond when you kind of call for help. But more importantly, what I noticed when my husband started using Amazon to store some of our, kind of photos or whatever, is that bill just started growing and growing and growing. And because Amazon doesn't have this whole notion of data deduplication, kind of managing the footprint, retention management, that kind of stuff. So, because it was just a generic, let's move your data off into the cloud, it didn't also have the other components that you would expect from a data protection solution. So, important to look at the data footprint management. Also, the recovery procedures. I talked about the fact that if you call somebody, if you're using a purpose-built cloud, you have somebody who knows how to respond to you in the case of a disaster, how to, what it means to ship off your data, what the recovery point might be, what kind of assistance you might have. And that's important to have on the other side of the phone. And then also the staffing requirements. If you put something off in Amazon, you probably have the same staffing requirements that you would today. So pretty big difference. The other thing we would recommend is to make sure that you look at your backup and recovery plan as a living document. We worked with I believe it was an insurance provider located down in the Memphis region, in which we went in there, our team kind of set the company up, documented where all the systems were, got the right retentions, the backup policies, the nightly backup policies, what have you. We went back in to do an audit 6 months later, and we found that everything was a mess. And especially in a virtualized environment, things stand up and go down, and it's completely a living organism that you're trying to protect. And usually the people who are standing up new servers don't have an idea of what their corporate retention policy is. So you need to have somebody who owns this and is responsible for maintaining that the backup and recovery plan as a living document. Now the other thing is another kind of somebody in the healthcare industry. It was a hospital that we were working with, and they had lost, I can't remember if it's their Exchange server or just their file system. And they had not communicated to the business how quickly they could actually get their servers back up and running. And so, they were taking a couple hours. The business was like, well, what are you guys doing? After about a day, they started calling us to say, what is my IT team doing? And the IT team had never tested what a recovery would look like. And they never had the ability to set the right expectations because they didn't even test. They didn't have the equipment available. They didn't really know what they needed to do a recovery. And so as a result, the business lost complete, confidence in their IT team. And they, in fact, somebody ended up losing their job because they clearly didn't know what they were doing. And this is just from backup and disaster recovery. I mean, it's not, again, you could be great at deploying all sorts of new applications in a virtualized environment, but if you mess up backup and disaster recovery, it could cost the job, which is too bad. Some of you, I think, are subject to auditors. Usually auditors come in and want to see your data protection plan, your disaster recovery plan. And in fact, a lot of times they do want to make sure that you can recover pieces of data and pieces of information, not necessarily execute a disaster, but one thing that you should be careful of is making sure that you have that documented plan, you have the documented results of your last test, and that you also have all of your encryption keys to make sure that you can recover your data. And then finally, the last recommendation that we have is to always test. Always test to make sure that you're covered. Okay, so we started off, kind of the topic of this conversation is the cloud disaster recovery, or business resiliency really, reality or hype? And if you look at this, you'd say, I just want to set expectations. It's kind of hype when you start thinking about the fact that it can, it can replace all of your people. It can automatically produce a plan for you. It's not going to be able to do that. It can't produce new workstations, automatically. So, there are some things that the cloud isn't going to be able to do, but there's a lot of things that the cloud can do. And more importantly, it's definitely, if you adopt it for cloud disaster recovery, it's going to save you time and money and a lot of worry. So if you can fill out that evaluation form and then visit us down at the Broadleaf booth that's down in the main hall. And then the other thing is get a free disaster recovery assessment, just to kind of get a sense of where you stand and whether there's any help that we can provide in terms of taking you to the next step.